Great to have you online with us for our first webinar ever on Employment First. I'm Jean-Michel Giraud. For those of you who don't know me, the President and CEO of Friendship Place. I've been working in the field since 1982. I go back a ways. Started during the deinstitutionalization movement in Massachusetts when we were bringing folks out of the institutions and the state hospitals. So my background is in community programming, developmental disabilities, mental health, and then I cross-trained in dual recovery, mental health and addiction. And with me today on the webinar is Miriam Neck, who is the division director of our AimHire program and really a founder of the model that we're going to talk to you about this afternoon. So again, we're delighted to have you with us. I think more folks are going to be joining us as we go along. And just a reminder again that we will present roughly for 20 minutes each. I will go into more general information and then Miriam will really delve into the model. And to use your chat box or just to put questions directly to us during the latter part of the training, the last 20 minutes, so that we can have a real conversation about this. So the reason for this webinar is that Matthew Doherty of U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness asked me to post a blog on their website. And when this happened, we received a lot of calls and emails about the model. So we were delighted, of course, to have that and decided that instead of responding to each person individually, we would offer this webinar. And hopefully it's a first of many. So Friendship Place is 27 years old. This is our mission statement on the screen. We work with people who are experiencing homelessness or on the brink, and we help people rebuild their lives as quickly and effectively as they can while they drive the rebuilding process. We'll be talking about our approach also, so I'll go into more of that. We do use a person-centric approach. We are strength-based, meaning that we help the person get in touch with their own strengths and drive the rebuilding process. As I just mentioned, every program is tailored to the individual or now to the family so that it can help the folks the best way possible. We put a lot of compassion, a lot of heart into the work. We think it's essential in homeless services to have that in order for people to feel comfortable and keep coming back. We are empowering and we find ways to say yes to people who have heard no so many times that it is at least frustrating and sometimes even worse to hear that from other programs that things are not available. So we go out of our way to find ways to say yes and create possibilities for folks. We have built Friendship Place up in the last 12 years by listening to the most important voices, the participant voices, so the folks who come to us for services. And we have brought into the house the motto of On Our Own of Maryland, which is nothing about us without us. So we have the most important people, the participants, at the table whenever important decisions are made. People represent the consumership on the board, running our speakers bureau now, and inform the process every step of the way. So here are our programs. There are many, and I'm not going to go through every one of them, but I will give you a brief evolution of where we started, which was with street outreach, and then some psychiatric and medical consultations, some shelters, which are now 24-hour access shelters. So you get your keys or code, and you can take second and third shift jobs. Miriam will be telling you later how important that is, of course, in rebuilding, so people can leave us more quickly with a job and a place to live. When I started, we were using an abstinence model. We, within the first 2 years, adopted housing first. This was a turnaround point for us. It spreads throughout the service delivery. We feel that it's a more humane and inclusive model for people who may not know about it. It's come as you are, you get the apartment, and you rebuild from within. no questions asked about your willingness to engage in mental health or recovery treatment. Rather, get well inside and grow from there. And then the team helps you with different service possibilities. That positioned us, I think, extremely well in terms of the trends in the field from 10 years ago and up. But in 2011, we did start to look at rapid solutions in response to the crisis. Rapid solutions, we coined the phrase in the house, include for us rapid rehousing, homelessness prevention, and employment first. So employment first is an important new model in the field in that it really focuses on putting people in jobs quickly. That's why it's called employment first. For people who may be used to that terminology from the developmental disability system, with us in homeless services, it really means some of the same, but it also means something different. And again, what it means is that we assume employability. We look at everybody as having a skill set. There is something we all can do, no matter what our current life circumstances, to become employed again. And so we look for the skill set, we help the person get in touch with it, we expedite the soft skills training. And if you have any questions about that, we will answer them later. And then we put people in front of employers as quickly as we can to facilitate a hire. This is all competitive. There is no special arrangements with employers. There is relationship building, obviously, but the applicant has got to sell themselves during the interview and get the job. We make the hire happen as quickly as we can, and we rehouse immediately behind that with a 1 month subsidy that is provided by our direct housing fund. So it's very simple. When you look at it, housing stability impacts on job retention because people are rested, they're able to have good hygiene, feel comfortable on the job, have clean clothes, eat well, sleep well, have their own space at night so they can relax and process the day, helping them keep the job. And as people keep the job, they get to keep their apartments. So job retention impacts back on housing stability. It's a very simple model and it's very effective. And we got to combining housing with job placement because we heard back from an applicant who said that he was working in a new office now downtown, was still sleeping in a shelter, and felt that it was particularly uncomfortable to be among co-workers in the morning because he didn't feel fresh and ready, basically. So listening to consumer voices is so important to help you build a model when you start, as we did, from scratch. We work with employment partners, of course, and as you see at the bottom, we incorporate housing and retention. It's really important. One thing about this model also is that time is a key element. The time we use is not our time because we're all set. We have a job, we have a place to live, but the folks who come to us lend us their time, it's their time, and because they are in homelessness or on the brink, it is essential, we believe, and we've really internalized that, to work as quickly and effectively as we can. So we feel that in the rapid solutions in particular, but in homeless services in general, the notion of time is essential, and we ought to be very mindful of using the time, people's time effectively. The model you will hear from Miriam is highly relational. There are ways you can re-enter once you've exited, once you've been placed on the job, and you're always a member of the community and can always come back to your case manager or somebody else on the team to get timely support if you're experiencing some difficulty on the job. We've now come to recognize this as a key part of the model. It's a very important one. The model also rides on salesmanship and job development. So for people out there who may be thinking about setting up their own employment first program, it's essential that team members have a sense of salesmanship, are able to get the doors open with employers, establish and sustain long-term relationships with employers in order to ensure success and create partnerships with employers that are dependable. The model is effective and cost effective. You will see a slide later on, but we like to repeat things sometimes in these webinars for good communication. A slide putting the whole cost, including staffing and all other costs, for housing and job placement at 4,800. This is already close to 2 years old. We're going to reassess that figure during the year, but that makes this solution particularly cost effective when you compare it to other solutions in homeless services. A question I sometimes get is, so because you're putting people in jobs right away, you don't believe in long-term training? We do believe in long-term training. We have simply reversed the order. We need the job placement to come first because of the situations people are in. And as people want to engage in vocational or long-term training for professional development, we help them access that in the evenings and weekends the same way any one of us would attend classes or seminars after they are placed, and now that they're comfortable in their living situations. We feel that it's a better way to attend training. You can focus on training more effectively. So there is a national conversation on employment first that has been going on now for several years. We are not the only employment first providers in the country. There are other states where it is promoted officially, and other providers are doing it in the country. But we have, it's been close to our hearts to have our voices heard on this matter, because we feel that it's a model that is really person-centric and really respects people's time and aspirations. It's also very effective, as I've mentioned. So we have shared it at conferences at the National Alliance to End Homelessness, with Heartland Alliance in Chicago. We've gone back and forth and presented on each other's panels with U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, as I mentioned, and also with folks like the National Association of Workforce Development Professionals. We are individual members, some of us on the staff are. So we have presented at their conference. We'll be there again in May. We have been approached recently by the Rapid Results Institute. They are interested in taking a look at what's going on in DC. And we feel that it's going to take some work because as we present at conferences, we realize that the traditional aspect of workforce development is still very prominent, and that there is some undoing to do in order to move to the new practices, maybe even a sense of fear-based thinking out there that, hey, if I send somebody to my employer too soon and it doesn't work out, there's going to be a negative reflection on me and the program. And we don't find that at all. Rather, we find that employers say, well, if it didn't work out for this person, can you send me somebody else? So it's a very positive way, an empowering way to work that we have at Friendship Place. And now I would like to briefly tell you how we got AimHire started, and then turn things over to Miriam. We got AimHire started in the aftermath of the 2008 crisis, because our population was changing. We were going from chronically homeless folks at basically 90% to people coming to us now who had been destabilized by the crisis. They were losing mortgages, rentals, wherever they were coming from, other states often, and were not able to get back in the employment arena, because even in DC, where we tend to have maybe more employment options, things were difficult. So we were not doing anything to help these folks, and we tasked ourselves with developing a work group of consumers, of course, volunteers, board members and staff, and then we developed some practices. I will say the beginning was rough, and that's for people out there who are thinking of developing their own. It's not easy. The first 6 months, we developed great practices, and we placed nobody till we assembled the right team with Jermaine Hampton and Miriam, who's going to tell you about this.
Hi, everybody. My name is Miriam Neck. I'm the Division Director of the AimHire program. A little bit about me. I actually started at AimHire in Friendship Place as an intern. I got my bachelor's in psychology and they gave me a chance. And so I, for the past 6 years, have been able to see this program grow and flourish and this model really take off. And so I'm here to really talk about the model. The model in practice. Yeah, Jean-Michel went over the model, but what does that actually mean for program implementation? What does that actually mean for your staffing structure, for how you actually provide those services? How do you incorporate the model into that? So a couple of things about the program staff and cost structure. Jean-Michel mentioned that we're pretty effective and cost effective at $4,800. If you were to put a cost, $4,800 per participant. And for $4,800, we think is pretty lean. That includes not only the cost of the case management, the services, but other client costs that are incurred, including transportation, certifications, and it also includes rental assistance and subsidies, so to help launch into permanent housing after they've obtained employment. So $4,800 to end homelessness. Not bad. We have a 6-member team: director, assistant director, employment specialist, 3 employment specialists, a program analyst, training coordinator, and a job developer, which we'll talk a little bit about. So it's a small team, but really robust and really powerful team. We also have a really core group of volunteers, around 20 consistent volunteers, some of which are also board members, that have play a really important role in the program and providing a lot of innovative services that the staff don't necessarily have the expertise in or can't meet. So really critical. Another thing to keep in mind about the program is that we are majority privately funded. We do receive some government funds from the SNAP Employment and Training Program through DHS here in Washington, D.C., but otherwise majority privately funded. But that's been really critical in allowing us to stay pretty nimble and innovative and flexible when it comes to providing services to our participants and meeting their very individualized needs, which I'll go over in a bit. So some key features of the program. Friendship Place's model as a whole, we're very relational. We build rapport, and same with the Employment First model. We provide individualized coaching and case management. So not just employment coaching, but other supportive services as well. And we're very individualized. It's really intentional that we sit down with someone coming in through our office and have a conversation. What is it that they're going through? What is it that's been a barrier to employment and stability? And what is it that we could do to help them end their homelessness? And we have a conversation that helps build the trust with those participants. And so that not only helps our interventions be more effective, because we have that trust and they trust us that we have their best interests in heart, but it keeps them engaged as well. When you're dealing with individuals that are in crisis, all kinds of things come up, and that does inhibit engagement sometimes. But building rapport really does help participants feel like they can come back and they can talk with you, even if things are going, whether things are going well or not. So that's a really important part of the Employment First model that I have to emphasize, is you need to spend the time to work with your participants one-on-one. The structure, the way it is we actually provide a lot of one-on-one coaching, similar to, I guess, the way a for-profit career coaching firm would do. It's one-on-one, we give you the time, and it's tailored. Another word that I didn't put on the slide, but it's very tailored to the particular needs that each participant presents with. So whether it's someone that really just needed their resume updated and that will help them launch into a job, or they just needed transportation to get to an interview, or a participant that needed the whole gamut of services and coaching and a lot of support to really get to that place. Our structure, the way we utilize the model allows us to be really flexible in that way, and it's important to be flexible. So I mentioned flexibility and innovation. Those are really important features that your staff also should have as well. With this model, we are not cookie cutter. So we're not here to say, well, you have to go through X, Y, and Z job readiness course for 2-3 weeks before we can actually help place you in a job, help give you those connections or leads. We're not here to say that you have to do that. People that are, the participants that are coming in through our program are dealing with financial and housing instability. So they are either experiencing homelessness or at risk of experiencing homelessness, and we are here to help them stabilize, which means placing them first. That requires being able to think quickly and act quickly. We have plenty of participants that come to us and say, I have an interview tomorrow, but I don't have any money to get there. And so we're able to act fast and get them the resources they need to get to that. So whether it's 2 weeks or an entire year, we're here to help the participants actually move forward so they can actually end homelessness. Jean-Michel mentioned before that there's no time limit on our services. I think in a future slide I'll be mentioning average time to placement for participants that we've helped place in jobs. But either way, the model requires that you don't constrain participants in a particular time limit. Things come up, life happens, and it's not necessarily a linear progression to ending homelessness. And so it's important to stay flexible that way. Actually, one thing I'll mention before I get into job development, another key feature of the way the employment specialists work is we're very collaborative, and we don't make the assumption that we can work through all those barriers and provide all the services they need. There's quite a range that participants come in needing assistance with, whether it's medical, mental health, assistance researching certain employers. If they are returning citizens, there's quite a range. So we may not necessarily be able to provide all the services, but what we make sure to do is, even if we cannot provide the service to that participant, we will lean on a very strong partner network and a very strong community involvement to help participants get the resources they need. So we'll refer out to our strong partner network, but we won't necessarily let them go and say, here you go, here's a referral, good luck. That's not the way we conduct this model. What we will say is, here's a resource that will actually help get the services that you need, but we're gonna be here with you, working with you until you actually achieve the milestones that you're looking to achieve. And so we won't just let participants go. We'll rely on our really strong network. One other thing that I wanted to reiterate that Jean-Michel mentioned earlier, that while we do focus on placement first, that does not necessarily mean that we won't assist our participants in getting credentialing and getting the certifications and the training that they need. We focus on employment first and getting placed as quickly as possible because we want to mitigate the financial crisis that our participants are experiencing when they come through the door, the instability, we want to mitigate the homelessness as soon as we possibly can. So we focus on identifying the skills that they have, the work experience, the credentials that they have at the time they come into the office, and help them launch into a job from then. After that, we'll focus, on getting credentials. After that, we'll focus on getting the credentials, the certifications, the extra training that they might need to launch into higher paying jobs and to launch their career. But we definitely focus on employment first. Now to job development. If you're not in French Place in this call, send a quick chat and let me know and say yes if you actually have a job developer in your staff or are looking to have a job developer in your staff. If you can, just type a quick yes in the chat. But I'll go into how critical job development is into making the employment first model really work. So job development, which involves incorporating employers into your network, building relationships with them so they'll interview and place our participants is really, really key. The job developer has to have really high sales ability. And what they're selling to an employer are participants that have skills and have work experience they have a need, they have positions that they're hiring for, and these participants have skills that they can utilize and really enhance their company. And so a job developer needs to be able to sell that. A job developer needs to work off of the assumption, the employment first assumption that everyone is employable, that they have skills right now that they can use to launch into a job, and an effective job developer will do that. So they'll bring employers into their network, they'll maintain relationships, and they'll help expedite the placement process by helping participants get interviews. And it may not be the first interview they get or the second interview they get, but getting interviews, the more interviews a participant can get, the faster that they'll be able to launch into a permanent job. So it's really critical to have a job developer in your team to be able to provide fresh set of leads, fresh set of connections, and employers that really hopefully would understand your at the end of the day, understand your mission and your model, and will still want qualified candidates. So I mentioned strong partner and volunteer network. Another feature about our program, we are a six-member team, six full-time and 2 part-time, seven-member team. That's total, 7 full-time positions total. And it's a pretty small team, but we still need to stay innovative and meet very unique, particular needs of that our participants come with. And so our volunteers, we have about 20 consistent volunteers now, and they provide us with support on quite a variety of roles, from front desk to administrative to actually mentoring and coaching to facilitating workshops. And it's been really helpful to have that because they can meet, like I said, very niche needs. I know we've had a volunteer who had very particular international development experience, and we had a participant that came in looking to launch into very particular international development nonprofit jobs. And so it was a perfect match. And so we want to make sure we can provide the coaching that's tailored without providing every service that participants need, but the tailored coaching. So Jean-Michel also mentioned that we couple housing and employment, and that is really important to note that both have to happen at the same time. So when we are when we have that initial conversation with our participants, we are discussing housing and employment at the same time. Even if we're not necessarily able to place them in a permanent housing situation right away, we're still talking about it from the beginning. So we're talking about housing from the beginning. We expedite job readiness, we help them connect with employers, get interviews, and get hired. Then we help them retain that job, but immediately we're talking about housing. What can we do to help place you into a permanent housing situation so you can maintain that job and rebuild your life? We also work with some congregations that provide 24-hour access sheltering. And that's been really key in providing a transitional place for participants to go in our program while they're working on employment, not just in our program, in all of Friendship Place. So a transitional place to go so they can lay their head, really have a safe place to focus on their job search. After we've placed our participants, we then provide permanent housing, access to permanent housing through our direct housing program. So typically that would mean a 1-month subsidy into a place, and making sure after that they are secure and stable. And that's where retention services come in. We have just increased our retention tracking to 6 months, but in the past it's been 3. But we make sure to provide services to participants to make sure that they're stable. We're not just here to place and say good luck, we got you placement. That's a number for us. That's not what we're here to say. We're here to say, okay, we've got you, we've helped you get placed. Now what can we do to make sure that that's a stable job, that you actually can pay enough, earn enough to pay your way? So retention services are a really robust part of our program as well. This is a brief slide. This is a slide I will just mention really briefly. This is something you can take a look at a little later. It's kind of a life cycle of the participants that go through our program. But one key takeaway from this slide is that it's really important when you're working with someone to be able to allow participants, allow people to come back, allow job seekers to come back if they've lost a job that you help them get, to come back and problem solve those challenges again and get connected to another job. Replacement is really important. Replacement on jobs is really important, and replacement on housing as well is really important. It's not necessarily linear. You'll have people who will, things come up and they're going to need to come back to your program, but we have had the opportunity to be really flexible with that and allow for people to come back and say, that's okay, let's get back up on that horse and try again. So a couple of program outcomes. I've outlined here some key measures that we track. Job placement, average 3-month retention rate, average hourly pay rate, and something new that we've been tracking, average time to placement. As you can see that, we've had a steady place in jobs for the past few fiscal years. Our average 3-month retention rate, I think, is pretty high compared to national average, and that's a really important aspect of our program. It really signals the fact that we are not only helping people get placed, but we're making sure that if that job is going to stick. If not that job, then another job right after. But we're making sure people stay employed so they can manage to pay the bills and maintain their housing. Average hourly pay rate, we've been increasing over the years. Minimum wage in DC is $11.50 an hour, but that's nowhere near enough. I think the living wage is $13.68 in DC, and that's still, people who live in DC know that even $13.68 is not enough, especially for a family in DC with the housing situation the way it is here. But we have continued to push our employer connections and push our services to make sure that we're not just stopping at minimum wage. We're pushing those boundaries and getting to a living wage. And so our FY18 target is $14 an hour, and I believe we're pretty close to that. And I think we've also surpassed, we're beyond our 3-month target average retention, 3-month retention rate. We've actually increased our retention tracking to 6 months. And the one thing to note is, even though we've had a 3-month retention rate and our retention tracking is six months, that does not necessarily mean that at 3 months or 6 months, we're here to say, well, we provided 3 or 6 months, that's it, that's all we can provide. We're not here to say that at all. We're here to touch base at that point, but if participants need longer term services, we do have quite a few that do, to really stabilize, to make sure that they are in a stable position, we'll provide that. And average time to placement, as you can see, has increased a bit over the years, and we think that in FY18 it might be a little over 3 months. But we're seeing in the participants that come through the door, we're seeing more severe barriers, higher percentage of returning citizens and whatnot. So we'll see in a slide. So some demographics I wanted to mention about the different industries that our participants end up getting placed or that have that background in. So hospitality, security, food service, those end up being quite a majority of the people that come through the door. I didn't put that on the slide, but we do have majority of participants that come through the door end up having high school diploma or GED. But even if they do not, they're still getting placed in jobs. We are seeing more in higher skills trades, construction trades, healthcare. But we have worked with people from some lower wage jobs, like in the restaurant, sometimes some restaurant jobs too. We've placed a couple of lawyers as well. So we really are able to be pretty flexible on that front and not say that just because you have a particular skill set, or not to make assumptions about why people are struggling with finding employment based on their background. We're here to help provide as much coaching as we can. And the volunteer network really comes into play. Okay, sorry, we just got a question. But we'll leave that question to the Q&A. We'll answer that in the Q&A. So a couple of other demographics, just a couple of numbers that I wanted to bring out. FY 16 and 17, the percentage of families has gone up and returning citizens has gone up. I didn't put this on the slide, but our FY 18, so far, I think we're at 43% returning citizens, and about the same percentage of families. So we are seeing a lot more of the reentry population coming in through the door, and we've had to take a look at our program design to make sure that we're meeting those particular needs as well. So I wanted to end my portion of the presentation with some success stories. I think they really do highlight the importance of having coupling housing and employment services, and just how the model can work when all the pieces are together. So here on the left, you have Mark's story. Mark is on the left-hand side, Mark is the gentleman in the middle. Mark came to our program, I think, 2013 or 2013. He came to our program in 2013. His background is in loan underwriting, and he was doing really well for himself in California. Had a really good situation, the family, condo, 401k, had really set up for success. Now, the 2008 financial crisis, the firms that he was working for in the 2000 financial crisis ended up going under. And thus his career was halted. And from that, he became unemployed. After that, he was not really able to get back into that same kind of work. So ended up losing his car, his house, then went his savings, his 401k. Unfortunately, also lost his marriage and was disconnected from his children. He ended up moving. He was in California. He moved back to this area, and was connected with Friendship Place through a church that he actually used to tithe in and provide, give alms to, I think. So we were able to work with him at Friendship Place. We were able to provide him through the AimHire program, provide him with really tailored services. I mean, what he really needed is to kind of see that he still has skill sets, he could still rebuild. He also struggled with major depression, and we worked through that. We worked through how to get employed, even through that. He ended up getting his first job after a bout of unemployment was with in Ace Hardware, actually in a hardware position. After that, that lasted for a couple of weeks, and he launched into a concierge position and rebuilt from there. And it isn't until, I think it's been like maybe 4 years, where he actually now is back into the same kind of work that he was doing before. So he really kind of rebuilt at that point. Now, I mean, he's back doing what he loves and is really, really successful. And we were able to assist him with permanent housing. And I think we connected with his family as well. I'll mention really quickly Deborah's story. Deborah is the young woman with the child there on the right. Deborah came to us, and Deborah and her child were experiencing homelessness and were really struggling. There were some mental health issues there that were really making it difficult to stay motivated in the job search. But she worked with our job developer and stayed in one of our transitional apartments that we had at the time. And was able to have a place to stay and rebuild, and we gave the time to rebuild. After working with Eric, our job developer, who's right next to her, she was able to find employment working at with I think it's Hotel Monaco, and is now actually what she's doing in that picture was actually through the hotel is actually donating back to Friendship Place. So she got into a position where she wanted to give back. As you can see, she's pretty happy there. So these are a couple of stories that we thought we wanted to mention. So that comes to the end of our discussion, and we wanted to open it up to any Q&A, to any questions that anybody would have. We will be unmuting everyone in case you would like to talk, ask any questions out loud. You're welcome to just type it out in the chat box as well. Okay, so we did have one question. Could you talk about what kinds of adjustments you've needed to make to accommodate their needs, that AimHire is serving more vulnerable participants in the past? Could you talk about what kinds of adjustments you've needed to make to accommodate their needs? It's been quite a variety of things that we've needed to do. And a couple of things to note that that really signal to us that participants are coming in with are more vulnerable and have more needs are the longer time it's taken to place. And there's nothing wrong with that, actually, as whatever our participants need at the time that we're here to serve. But what we've had to do is really make sure we're providing enough robust services when it comes to mental health. So we have had to incorporate volunteer support. We have currently a volunteer that has really strong mental health background. She's had her own practice in social work, and she's done social work, and she has a lot of clinical knowledge. And so she advises us on what we need to do in our program to make sure that we're helping work through some of those barriers. It's been really helpful in that kind of coaching. We have also needed to adjust overall, program metrics and outcomes with that. We're not quota based, and that's the strength of the Employment First model. We're not here to say that you have to place a certain amount. And it's been really key to have that flexibility, because as we see that there are more people coming in that are vulnerable, we're still able to give them that time. And we make sure to communicate that to a lot of our funders, both private and government funders, and say, this is what we're seeing is happening. And so we need the ability to take the time with participants. The private funding has also allowed us to provide a lot resources for quite a bit of different needs, including vision support, including other housing related supportive services, payments that participants need help with. I don't know if that answers. I don't know if you have anything to add on that front in terms of.
Well, it's an array of needs that we're seeing: transportation, food assistance, saving storage units. Because this is privately funded, it's a very flexible approach that really allows us to meet people's needs when they come through the door, which in turn makes a huge difference in terms of the trust, the level of trust we're able to build with people. Because when you respond to people's needs and they see that, they feel that people feel that they've come to the right place.
I think we've had to really make sure that we have the right kind of coaching when we work with participants, and really make sure that the things that we're doing in our program are not barriers to engagement as well. We're seeing more vulnerable populations, which means that sometimes engagement, it can be tough. If you're not only experiencing homelessness, but you're trying to find employment, but then something happens to your only relative and you're the only person that can take care of them, or you have a medical need that just came up. You absolutely need surgery, but not only do you not know where you're going to stay to heal from that surgery, but you have to stop the job search. Those are things that we've had to go with the flow with our participant base and what we've needed to do. So it's mostly been in program design and how we make sure that we're not causing any barriers. We've reinvigorated our own orientation process to make sure that we're not causing barriers, and we do make sure we can provide really rapid services. even if they're not necessarily consistently coming in or whatnot, we have participants come in all the time that say, I know I'm not in your program, but I really need shoes for my job tomorrow. And we're not here to say, well, you're not in the program. You need to wait till you're in the program before you can get that. We're here to say, let's go to the nearby Target or TJ Maxx and see if we can get you shoes. Because if shoes is the reason you're not able to go on that job, that's not good enough for us. We don't want to be hindrances to that. So we've had to be really ultra flexible on some of those needs there. So, any other questions? Does anybody have any other? I know we're a little ahead of time here. It's 1:45. What we will be doing is sending out this recording so that you can take a look at it a little later. I didn't mention in the presentation, I didn't put that in the slide. It's one thing that I didn't mention is that it's important to think when you're thinking about outcomes, for example, and you're designing your program, it's important to make sure that the outcomes really are aligning with your mission. And our mission is to end homelessness. And our outcomes are not just to say, we're not just tracking the outcomes that would signal short-term success. We're tracking outcomes that help us see whether we're actually successful in helping someone maintain long-term stability. That means not just pay rate, but are we getting to higher than living wage? Not just a retention rate, but are we getting to a high retention rates? So we really want to make sure that your outcomes are reflective of the solutions, the mission that you're moving forth. I did not add our logic model to the slides, but I can send that out as well. Just important to see just how the program is structured and what goes in the program in order to produce the outcomes we're looking for. Is there any?
Do we have any more questions or comments? Your lines are on, your phone lines are on.
It's probably why you hear that. Oh.
We do have something. How did you decide on a 3-month retention rate of 75% in FY18 when it's been higher in other years?
So that's a good question. That's actually a really good question.
Somebody's reading the slides.
Yes. So actually, I did the FY17 goal was actually 70%, and we did surpass that. But the reason why I put 80% or 85% at the retention rate is not because we're not pushing that, but I want to make sure that we're not sacrificing quality just to push those numbers higher and higher and higher. And we took it incremental. We went from 70. I'm sorry if you hear my echo, by the way. I hear myself. We went from 70% in FY17 to 75, just because we also wanted to make sure that we're confident in our services. But we wanted to make sure it wasn't a fluke of a year, or there wasn't a particular year where we happened to have a better year. We wanted to make sure that increase in retention rate is actually due to program design and actually providing good quality retention services. So 75 was just to push the needle forward, but not to prevent ourselves from pushing so hard that we end up actually reversing our retention rate and providing lower than we want to do. So, if we keep going at this rate, of course we'll keep pushing it higher, but it's just to be careful, make sure we're not getting ahead of ourselves. Assuming that our services are perfect, there's always room for improvement in our programming. I hope that answered it. That question.
It also reflects the changing trends in our population with the growing number of returning citizens. If you go back to that slide, you're seeing that we're serving more than a third people who are coming out of incarceration, and slightly more than a third also people who are in families who have young children, which is impacting on the job placement time and on the retention, possibly.
So, right, that is a good point. We are seeing that there are higher vulnerabilities, and we want to make sure that we can kind of anticipate some of those changing demographics. I mean, luckily, DC employment in DC is doing pretty well compared to previous years. And so we are seeing that a lot of participants are able to get jobs on their own and not necessarily have to come in to receive services, which is good. We want people to be successful on their own in the job market. So we are seeing that the people are coming through the door are having extra challenges to employment, and we need to anticipate that. We didn't jump ahead to 80% retention. We have another question. Can you give examples of what businesses you have developed relationships with for job placements? Can you talk about how you've been able to develop relationships with businesses in order to employ participants who have criminal backgrounds and other vulnerabilities? Thank you. That's a good question. So we do have quite a range of employer connections, right? Just to mention the range that we do have, from food service to hospitality to some construction. A really major connection that we have is a huge hospital network here in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And while there still does end up being some restrictions in terms of the background issues and employers not being able to kind of push at a certain point, our connections, some of the connections have allowed us to advocate for a participant so that they can move forward, even though typically they may not be looked at because of the background. And of course, so DC, quickly to mention, DC has a ban the box law, where employers are not allowed to ask about criminal background at the point of the application. They need to wait until they actually offer a position before they can then do a background check. After they've done the background check, if they're going to reject someone for employment, they need to provide real reasoning as to why. And so that has allowed us to be able to advocate for participants that may not that initially would have been screened out. We're seeing that a lot of the employers that really are employing those with criminal background and other vulnerabilities, we try to target employers that have quite a variety of jobs, but a lot of the most successful ones understand the population that we work with. And we're not here to say that we're making relationships based on, please do this favor for us, or please help out someone who's struggling. We approach it as a strength-based, we approach job development as with a strengths-based methodology. But the strongest employer connections, like a security connection and the hospital network, they understand whom we're working with, and they know the nuances of certain criminal backgrounds. They know that certain criminal backgrounds don't necessarily mean that they can't do the work or that they are actually safe. So a lot of it is educating employers on what it actually means necessarily to, for participants to have certain backgrounds, and help as much as we can make them feel better about particular liabilities that they might not be they might be concerned about. So the relationship, the more robust ones end up being where they're involved in our community, in Friendship Place. Whether they come and volunteer, they do presentations, they do workshops, or they attend some of our fundraising events. The more involved that they become, and that's not the case for every employer, the more involved that they become, the more we find out that they're able to overlook other vulnerabilities, or see the strengths through those vulnerabilities as well. So it's quite a range. We've had some food service in the past as well. We've had other firms, like the lobbying firm that overlooked that and provided an on-the-job training opportunity. It really just depended on how that connection came through.
We've also worked with mom and pops along the avenues here in Upper Northwest, smaller shops where somebody decided that as a business owner, they wanted to give somebody a second chance. They had paid their debt to society, and that helped get people into a first job, and then they could build on that. So that's important. But also selling the customer, meaning that you present the person in the best light possible to the employer, is a really important skill set for this as well. Any other questions for us? We have about 5 minutes to go.
Good questions all around.
Yes, thank you.
Of course, let me go back to the slide. Our contact information is here. If you'd like to, like to ask us any questions afterwards, and just send us an email, give us a phone call, and of course, like I said, we'll be sending the webinar. Are there any other questions before we wrap up? No.
Maybe we can wrap up. I just want to thank you all for being online with us today.
Yes.
It's been great.
Thank you for the opportunity to share our model and to share what the Friendship Place has been doing with Employment First. We're really excited about its future and hope that you can be part of it as well.
Yes, we look forward to hearing from you again. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.